Imagine going to a store to buy your favorite sneakers, only to find their price has jumped by 30%. When you ask the salesperson what caused this surge, they explain it's due to a new directive from the US president. This policy imposes tariffs on such goods, making them more expensive for consumers. Currently, a similar situation is unfolding with products coming from Canada, China, and Mexico. On February 2nd, 2025, President Donald Trump signed an executive order that introduced additional taxes and tariffs. For imports from Canada, a 25% tariff was imposed on steel and aluminum. Mexico faced a 25% duty on automobiles and agricultural products, while China saw a 10% tariff on electronics and clothing. For ordinary shoppers, the result is straightforward: higher prices across a wide range of goods. Why did Trump take this route? Officially, he claimed it was to protect American manufacturers. He argued that inexpensive imports were causing domestic factories to shut down, leading to job losses. However, there's another perspective. He also aimed to pressure companies into relocating their factories back to the United States. The logic was simple. If imports become more costly, businesses would be incentivized to build or move factories within America. Yet, in reality, this isn't an easy fix. Producing goods in the U.S. remains more expensive due to higher wages, increased taxes, and strict environmental regulations. For example, if a factory in China pays $5 an hour and an American factory pays 25, many companies simply choose to move elsewhere, like Vietnam, India, or Mexico. This pattern was evident when Trump imposed tariffs on China in 2018. Numerous companies, including Apple, Nike, General Motors, and Harley-Davidson, shifted production to other countries. Even if new factories are established in America, the supply chain still heavily depends on imported components. Approximately 90% of parts used in U.S. cars, for instance, come from abroad. Consequently, returning manufacturing to the United States doesn't guarantee a sharp increase in jobs. Conversely, tariffs already push up prices for everything: cars, clothes, electronics, affecting consumers overall. Meanwhile, other countries responded with firm countermeasures, wishing to inflict significant economic pain on the U.S. economy. To illustrate, imagine you sell vegetables at a market, and your biggest buyer, say a large restaurant, says it will only buy from you if you pay an extra 25% surcharge. Naturally, you would look for new clients or start raising your prices. Similarly, Mexico's response to the U.S. tariffs involved launching what's known as Plan B. They developed a three-step strategy. Mexico might impose its own tariffs on American goods, potentially targeting key imports like corn and soybeans, which the U.S. exports in large quantities, around 19 million tons of corn annually. Mexican farmers could then face a new challenge in finding buyers. Furthermore, in 2018, Mexico and Canada increased tariffs on American alcoholic beverages, such as bourbon and whiskey, to contest U.S. trade policies. This move hurt American producers significantly, demonstrating how trade tensions can ripple across economies. American cheese and beef, two staples in the United States, are set to become more expensive in Mexico as well, affecting everyday consumers in both nations. To reduce reliance on American imports, Mexico is actively seeking new suppliers, turning instead to countries like Brazil and Argentina for corn, and to China for automobiles. Why are the risks for the United States even greater than they appear? Former President Trump aimed to pressure Mexico with tariffs, but in practice, American companies bore the brunt. Without Mexican-produced parts and vehicles, a significant shortage looms. Currently, 1 in every 6 cars in the U.S. is assembled in Mexico, with major automakers like Ford, General Motors, Tesla, and Chrysler relying heavily on Mexican factories. Any disruption in these supplies risks sparking a sharp rise in vehicle prices across America. Similarly, consider avocados. 80% of imports into the U.S. come from Mexico. Continued pressure from Trump could prompt Mexico to place export restrictions, leaving Americans without their cherished guacamole. The 2018 trade tensions showed that American farmers suffered more than Mexico did, after tariffs prompted retaliation. Mexico stopped importing 6 categories of U.S. corn and pork, costing U.S. farmers billions and prompting demands for compensation. Now again, tariffs threaten to backfire, hurting both sides. American farmers, automakers, and even avocado enthusiasts will feel the pinch. Meanwhile, Mexico is gradually reducing its dependence on U.S. imports and expanding trade partnerships elsewhere. While this shift could have lasting regional economic impacts, it's just beginning. As the U.S.-Mexico dispute continues, Canada and China are preparing equally, if not more, aggressive responses. Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau firmly stated that his country would not allow the U.S. to dictate terms. Canada has responded by imposing retaliatory tariffs of 25% on key American goods, including automobiles. An especially severe blow, given Canada's role as a major customer for U.S. car manufacturers. In addition, Canadian exports like meat, dairy, vegetables, alcohol, and household appliances will become more expensive for Canadian consumers, impacting small and medium-sized businesses across the country. Canada is also actively seeking to diversify its trading partners by negotiating new agreements with Europe and Asia, notably increasing exports to China and the European Union, in part to reduce dependence on the U.S. China has taken even more drastic measures. It has filed a formal complaint with the World Trade Organization, accusing the U.S. of violating international trade rules. Beijing has also announced tariffs on American electronics and agricultural products, targeting industries like Apple, Intel, and U.S. farmers. A critical move involves restricting exports of rare earth metals, vital components for smartphones, military equipment, and electric vehicle batteries, that China supplies almost exclusively. If these supplies are halted, American manufacturing and technological development could grind to a halt, especially given the country's heavy reliance on Chinese rare earth imports. The escalating trade conflicts threaten to reshape global supply chains and economic strategies, setting the stage for a prolonged and complex struggle among the world's major economies. Canada and China are now prepared for a prolonged contest. Their response has gone beyond imposing tariffs. They are actively restructuring their entire trade systems. The United States may face defeat in the technological race as China controls vital resources that could slow down America's economic growth. Yet the situation remains volatile. While Trump continues a trade war with Canada, China, and Mexico, another player has entered the arena: Europe. How will the European Union respond? Trump has announced plans to impose additional tariffs on goods from the EU. If enacted, this would expand the trade conflict from just 3 countries to the entire world. Trump claims that Europe engages in unfair practices by subsidizing its industries and creating hidden barriers against American exports. With a significant trade surplus, selling more than buying, America seeks to restore balance. To do so, he plans to levy tariffs of 20 to 30% on European cars, wines, cheeses, clothing, and luxury brands like Louis Vuitton, Gucci, Dior, and Seidenbosch. German automobiles such as BMW, Mercedes, and Volkswagen could become $15,000 more expensive, while French wines and Italian cheeses risk turning into luxury goods beyond the reach of many consumers. Luxury items, along with cosmetics, apparel, and electronics, might see sharp price hikes. How will Europe react? The European Union has already declared its readiness to respond, signaling that it won't remain passive. If the United States applies tariffs, Europe will retaliate, potentially turning the trade war into a global conflict. This confrontation could strengthen European ties with China, especially if Washington pressures Europe further. The United States tariffs threaten one of its largest markets, Europe, which annually trades over $1 trillion with America. European tariffs could cost American businesses hundreds of billions. For example, Tesla sells every fifth electric vehicle in Europe. Tariffs could severely reduce its profits. Europe also dominates in aviation and healthcare, with 70% of Boeing aircraft assembled from European parts, and 40% of U.S. medical supplies sourced from European firms. Imposing export bans could spark crises in aviation and lead to rising healthcare costs in America. Trump risks alienating a key U.S. ally. Europe is not just an economic partner, but a strategic one. The conflict might spill over into political spheres, raising questions about whether this trade war could escalate into a broader crisis. President Trump has launched an economic offensive against several nations simultaneously: Mexico, Canada, China, and Europe, aiming to compel the entire world to trade on American terms. Instead of yielding, these countries are striking back, creating ripple effects across global markets. Mexico is seeking new partners and reducing dependency on U.S. goods. Canada retaliates by targeting American autos and rerouting trade routes. China threatens to restrict exports of critical metals vital to American electronics. Meanwhile, Europe is implementing retaliatory tariffs and possibly strengthening its economic ties with China. In this evolving landscape, who will emerge victorious? At first glance, it appears that the United States is in a dominant position. As the largest economy in the world, every nation has a strong interest in maintaining trade relations with them. However, this trade conflict extends beyond mere tariff disputes. It marks the beginning of a new era in the global economy. The United States no longer holds undisputed dominance as other centers of power challenge its influence, making their decisions subject to significant resistance. Yet the critical question remains unanswered. Will this confrontation escalate into a full-blown economic crisis, or will the world find a way to reach an agreement?